I must be hungry for nostalgia because I recently played Arcade Paradise and thoroughly enjoyed it. I saw it pop up on the Escapist's Hidden Gem series and honestly didn't even watch the video. I just assumed it was an arcade management sim and figured I could get down with that. While Arcade Paradise is certainly that, I also found a game that I loved almost every aspect of, and a deeper narrative than I was anticipating. I won't go into too much detail to avoid spoilers, but I did want to shed some additional light on a game that clearly had a lot of passion put into it. Arcade Paradise opens with a short cinematic showing that the player character has a fond history with arcades, but is currently in a transition period after dropping out of college. The player arrives at a run-down laundromat and receives voicemails from their father, a successful businessman, explaining that they are trying to teach you the importance of discipline and hard work by having you manage the facility. In the English translation, the father has a condescending tone that suggests that you managing the laundromat is more punishment than an opportunity. However, the player discovers there are arcade cabinets in the back that seem to be making more money than the laundromat, and thus the quest to grow and expand the arcade begins. The gameplay consists of washing, drying, and staging the loads of laundry as they arrive, while collecting income from the hoppers for the laundry tokens and arcade machines. Doing maintenance tasks such as picking up trash, cleaning up gum stuck in random places, and making sure the bathroom is clean also earn income. The game is stylized with a retro arcade vibe that the game is romanticizing, similar to No More Heroes for those of you that might not be familiar with the arcade aesthetic. As you collect income, you can spend that money to purchase additional arcade cabinets and expand the arcade. While that is ultimately the core gameplay, each arcade cabinet is unique and are standing tributes to classic arcade games from the 90s. You can also play each arcade game, and there are goals for every cabinet that, when they are met, increase the popularity and income per hour of the cabinet. While not every game is a winner, like Line Terror, an overwhelming majority of the arcade games are excellent. You can tell that love and care went into the aesthetics and sound design of the arcade games that successfully emulate popular games while also having their own identity. In doing this, Arcade Paradise also doubles as a wonderful trip down memory lane for someone that grew up in the golden age of arcades. As the story progresses and the arcade continues to grow, you can begin to see the effects on the community through various instant messaging chats or emails from arcade patrons. Eventually, the arcade grows into the entire building, full of life, neon lights, ugly carpeting, and the oddly comforting cacophony of sounds and chaos that can only be found in a bustling arcade. I really do want to stress just how impressive the arcade games are in Arcade Paradise, especially a game called Blockchain. In fact, this is the only time in my life I will tell people to get invested in Blockchain. It's a fantastically fun puzzle game in my opinion, and luckily, you unlock it pretty early into the game. Having thoroughly enjoyed Arcade Paradise, I was curious what other people on Steam thought of the game. At first glance, the game is being received positively, but there were a few negative reviews that got me to thinking about the topic for this video. Some of the reviews stated that their reason for not enjoying the game was that the game seemed to be two separate ideas forced into one package, which, at the surface level, isn't too far off. The game begins by presenting the laundromat as the core objective of the game, and takes the time to tutorialize the laundry process to ensure the player knows what to do. The arcade games, on the other hand, are initially presented as an afterthought, both narratively and in practice. They don't teach you how to play them. They're in a back room, hidden away, that you can't access until you learn how to do the laundry. So at first glance, the game seems to present conflicting ideas. The laundry cycles are long enough that waiting around for them to finish is boring, but short enough that you can't seem to make meaningful progress in any of the arcade games, some of which have built-in progression that persists between plays, but every time you quit a game, you start over from the beginning, which honestly is just like with a real arcade game, even though not teaching you how to play. At this point, it can become stressful to try and juggle everything, especially as the arcade and laundromat get more business, and I can understand that this could ultimately create a negative experience for a player. But what if that's the point? In my experience, the way the laundromat is presented and seemingly forced onto you by your father, I immediately felt disconnected from the laundromat. This disconnect, however, did not make me want to neglect the laundry duties because of my personal mindset of, if you're going to do a job, make sure it's your best effort. From this perspective, I can see how someone may misinterpret the goal of the game to make sure the laundromat is successful and that the arcade games exist just to pass time between washing and drying. However, this notion breaks down, in my opinion, as you continue to play the game. The arcade income very quickly outpaced the income of the laundromat, and even if we completely ignore the title of the game, it became clear to me through this that the goal was to grow the arcade. I'm not saying the negative reviews are wrong. Ultimately, if their experience was negative, they're completely justified in having a negative opinion of the game. But I think it's important to identify what it was specifically that made your experience negative and examine if that reason was internal or external. While a core pillar of a game is the gameplay, ultimately it's a package of many things, which made me ask a question: can a poorly communicated theme make a good game bad? While the theme of a game technically isn't as critical as gameplay, it can do wonders to set expectations or add to the immersion of a game. No matter the game you play, there is always a core goal trying to be achieved that every piece in its construction should contribute to elevating. However, because the gameplay is what a player most consistently interacts with, it can often be the only aspect that is critically examined. But on the other hand, if the core focus is a theme or story that the game is trying to tell, it's equally important to examine if a game is the strongest medium to present your idea as the creator. After all, games are generally meant to be played, and if the playing experience is bad, one could justify that as a bad game. This intersection is often where you encounter games commonly referred to as walking simulators, that are in essence just presenting a story behind gameplay that mainly consists of traveling to the next point of the story. If the gameplay is uninspired and a player isn't able to pick up on the theming of a game, this can easily leave the player bored or confused. While a game can certainly be good once you get it, this can result in alienating the people that are unable to make the connection, resulting in bad experiences. Having these bad experiences can make the game not fun to play, and therefore the player can proclaim the game is not good. If a player has to put significant effort in order to find the fun, they will almost always lose interest and move on to something else. Ultimately, it's up to the player to decide if something is good or bad for themselves, and it's important to understand that their opinion of a game isn't right or wrong, it's just their experience. I personally think that Arcade Paradise does a fantastic job of establishing expectations and telling the story it sets out to tell. Honestly, the game consistently exceeded my expectations in both narrative and world building for a game that seemingly presents itself as just an arcade simulator. Arcade Paradise hit many different tones that kept me having fun for the entire playthrough. Which is a good segue to ask, what makes a game fun for you? Let me know what you think in the comments. Catch you next time, take care, and keep having fun.